Andrew Jackson, he liked to kill American soldiers. Andrew Jackson killed a 17-year-old because he walked away from war. A 17-year-old who voluntarily, signed on board to fight with the great Andrew Jackson, only to be put to death by him when he, lost the nerve to murder during the heat of battle. Andrew Jackson, he was in a battle in the Revolutionary War. I always forget about this because he's the 7th president. He has slaves. He's a slave owner, and he also killed a lot of Native Americans. But he was the person who threw the first Democratic National Convention in 1836. The donkey symbol of the Democratic Party is because Andrew Jackson's haters called him a jackass. And, he was actually in a battle in the Revolutionary War, the 7th president, so, the 1820s, 1830s is when he's going to be the president. But he was around in 1776. He was actually 9 years old when the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. Andrew Jackson also suffered from salmonella. So not only did Andrew Jackson have a big old horse head, and you could land a 747 jet on that face, but he drooled. He was a drooling idiot. Excessive salivation, just drooling all the time, and that's why he got picked on, and probably why he became the bully. That he also was in 100 duels. So Andrew Jackson, Andrew Jackson, right? I don't give a fuck about Andrew Jackson. I think Andrew Jackson's a total piece of shit. But what I don't realize is how close he was to the American Revolution. He was just the 7th president, right? You had George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and then number 4, James Monroe, James Madison, number 5, number 6, John Quincy Adams, and then Andrew Jackson. So Andrew Jackson's like, the 7th, so he's like, a good distance away from the 1st. But he was there the whole time. Andrew Jackson has been with America since the birth of America. He was only 9 years old, actually. He was in America before America became America. Now, Andrew Jackson, so he fought in the American Revolution. I'm going to talk about his involvement in the Revolution. We'll talk about his early life, too. So Andrew Jackson is going to be, without a father. 3 weeks before Andrew Jackson was born, his father is going to die. Andrew Jackson is the youngest of 3 Scotch-Irish immigrant sons. So he's the son of Scotch-Irish immigrants from Northern Ireland. His father and his mother are from Northern Ireland, and his 2 older brothers were born in Ireland too, but Andrew Jackson was born in South Carolina. So 3 weeks before Andrew Jackson was born, so you got, the mother, who is Elizabeth Hutchinson. Elizabeth Hutchinson is pregnant with her 3rd son of, whoever Andrew Jackson's dad was. And he's going to go out in a logging accident. He's clearing their land. They're living on 200 acres. He's clearing their land. And then in a logging accident, he's killed. And he's only 29 years old. So Andrew Jackson's father is going to die 3 weeks before he was born. And he himself was only 29 years of age. So Andrew Jackson, as soon as he was born a bastard. I mean, could Andrew Jackson been any other kind of person? He was born a bastard, but he did attend local schools, including being educated by 2 Catholic priests. He was also a bully, but he happened to start a gang of hoodlums, and he was nice to his little, his little gang, until he turned 13 years of age, right? So 1776 had happened. 4 years later, George Washington is going to take any old child soldier into his ranks, right? I don't even think Che Guevara would do that. But Andrew Jackson's 13 years of age. He's 13 years of age, and now he's joining the American Revolution. June 20th, 1779, the Battle of Stono Ferry. Soon after the Battle of Stono Ferry, you're going to have Hugh Jackson, Andrew Jackson's older brother, who's going to die of heat exhaustion. So Hugh Jackson is going to join the American Brigade right under Colonel William Richardson Davie. And William Richardson Davie is who Andrew Jackson is going to fight for later on. But Hugh Jackson goes to fight for William Richardson Davie first against the imperialist redcoat oppressor bastard fucks. And Benjamin Lincoln, he beat the British. He beat the British in the Battle of Stono Ferry. So Hugh Jackson gave his life for an American victory near Charleston, South Carolina. 34 Americans were killed, including Hugh Jackson, who was 16 years old. He was already ill. So So he's going to die of heat exhaustion, right? So Andrew Jackson's father is already dead. He was born a bastard. He's got 2 brothers and 1 mother. Now he only has 1 brother left. Hugh Jackson has died. Hugh Jackson has died in the Battle of Stony Ferry. So that was June 20th, 1779. About a year later, the British is going to invade South Carolina, and they're going to capture Charleston on May 12th, 1780. Andrew Jackson, he's 13 years of age. This is the same age when he joins the Continental Army as an irregular, right, under William Richardson Davie. Now, before he joins, he's going to be encouraged by the massacre of the Waxhaws. So he's born in Waxhaw, South Carolina. The British invade South Carolina, May 29th, 1780. So the Battle of Waxhaws, Abraham Buford is the one leading the Continental Army, right? Old Buford, old Abraham Buford, what a Buford, just, leading the Continental Army, and he's going to lose. The Loyalist Army is led by the British officer Benaste Tarleton. So Abraham Buford refused to surrender initially, but then when Tarleton's mostly American Loyalist men attacked with cavalry, many of Buford's soldiers just threw down their arms immediately to surrender. And then Abraham Buford was trying to surrender, but when Benaste Tarleton, was doing a peace treaty, doing the truce, they were going to say, agree to some surrender terms. But when the leaders are meeting with each other, one of the patriots shot and killed his horse, causing his horse to fall and trap him underneath of it. The Loyalists were pissed at the breaking of the ceasefire truce and then attacked the patriotic American rebels. 113 rebels were killed by sword, by sabers, and only 5 redcoats were killed in the Battle of the Waxhaws. So the Battle of Waxhaws was a massacre. 113 rebels stabbed in the chest. And it didn't matter because they were just so pissed off. It didn't matter if the Americans were resisting or weren't resisting. No quarter was given to anybody. Anybody and everybody was killed. And this started a very bloody warfare in South Carolina, where you would have both the Patriots and the British who would just completely exterminate the other, column. So this is remarkable for 7 reasons. So Abraham Buford's going to lose, right? So this is bad for the Americans, bad for the Continental Army. The British is going to lead a Loyalist army. So the British come into America, invaded South Carolina, had a couple people with them, but mostly they're able to recruit Americans out of American households to go kill other Americans. This is brother versus brother, worse than the American Civil War was. My God, could you imagine? So the Redcoats invaded, and then Americans just said, well, we're British, so we're going to fight along with the British and kill these brand new Americans in spite of them being American-born. Therefore, they were Americans themselves, and they were killing their own kind. So that's who was fighting for the British officer, Benaste Tarleton. Apparently the Patriots weren't being, honorable when they were trying to surrender, and so they shot him. And then the, British and the Loyalist Americans who, were loyal to Britain started killed 113 Americans in Waxhaw, South Carolina. So this is a total massacre. 113 rebels are killed to everybody, and this is, they're loyalists to the crown, right, to the monarchy, to King George III, the dictator of the British Empire, the autocracy, the totalitarian ruler of the U.S. colonies. So that's who the loyalists in America supported, the British redcoat oppressors. And so they're marching and pillaging along the countryside. They already took over Charleston, right? The British already took over the capital of South Carolina. Now they got to take, the back country. They got to take some of these smaller towns and smaller places, and so they go after the Waxhaw, the little town of Waxhaw, and 300 redcoats, and a lot of Loyalists under Lieutenant Colonel Benaste Tarleton burned down Waxhaw houses, killed 113 Waxhaw people by sword. Many of the bodies were mutilated. The corpses had dozens of wounds in them, so they didn't just kill, a shit ton of them, that they killed the shit out of them, right? They didn't just kill them one time, they killed them at least a dozen or 2 times, just kept stabbing their, dead corpses, you sons of bitches. How dare you fight against us? and there was 150 that were wounded. So 150 Americans were wounded. They could barely move, and then they're going to go to the Waxhaw Church. And that's where Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson enter. Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson enters the American story, the American scene. So they're seeing all this bloodshed, all this, all this bloodshed, all this tragedy. Andrew Jackson and Robert had an older brother that just, were killed by the damn British, and now the British are burning houses down, killing their damn neighbors and shit. So this is too much, right? So Andrew Jackson is serving under William Richardson, and he actually got to see a battle, the Battle of Hanging Rock, on August 6, 1780. So this is part of the same campaign, right? You got the British Redcoats who went ahead and captured Charleston May the 12th, and then May 29th, they went ahead and burned down Waxhaw. They sacked Waxhaw, right? So they sacked Charleston, then they're going to the back country, sacking Waxhaw, and they're going after the Camden and a bunch of other, back country cities. So this is, 1780, so just right in line, right? So the British takes Charleston, the British takes Waxhaw, and then Andrew Jackson takes Hanging Rock. Actually, the battle, they win the battle, but they don't win the battle. So Andrew Jackson, he's with William Richardson Davie, right? He fought with the irregulars. He's 13 years old, worked on the staff of Colonel Davie, Patriots commander, mostly running errands, delivering messages. He was, William Richardson Davie's assistant, and he learned a bunch of military fighting style from William Richardson Davie. He learned a bunch. So later when he's fighting the War of 1812 and the British and all this other shit, he learned how to fight in the American Revolution under William Richardson Davie. So August 6, 1780, this is General Thomas Sumter. He's the general, right? He's the one over Davie, he's over Andrew Jackson and his brother Robert. So the General Thomas Sumter was just harassing British outposts. He wasn't engaging them directly, just trying to attack their, supply lines and finding stragglers and different outposts in the South Carolina back country. So in the Battle of Hanging Rock, right, they came across the British. Only 12 Americans were killed in the Battle of Hanging Rock. Only 12 Americans were killed. 200 British redcoat loyalist bastard fucks were killed. Major Davie attacked a fortified house and was able to steal 60 horses and weapons. So we assume Andrew Jackson was right there with them, right? Taking these 60 horses and weapons, finally getting the British back, taking their shit. They've already, killed one brother. And the battle lasted for 3 hours. Men were fainting from the heat and thirst. So it's crazy, right? The American Revolution, they're having to not just fight against bullets, but it's, they're dying of thirst and heat exhaustion. And there's a smallpox epidemic to boot. So the American Revolution had to deal with the smallpox, epidemic in the middle of their war. Here we got a little Kung Flu and letting Kung Flu kick our ass. Right? Oh, Kung Flu, the Flu Klux Klan. The Flu Klux Klan is kicking our ass. But the smallpox was ravaging the countryside, and we were still fighting a revolution. So, yeah, Andrew Jackson participated on the assault on a small British outpost in Hanging Rock. And the Patriots could have won, but they stopped fighting once they took over the thing and got the horses and the weapons. They stopped and they found they had captured a bunch of alcohol. They captured a bunch of rum. And so they got drunk, and then they just went on home. So they're kind of like, fuck this battle. We won this battle. Let's just get drunk and enjoy ourselves. Now, Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson, his brother, his one last remaining brother, are going to get caught. After the British had won the Battle of Camden, right? And this is Lord General Charles Cornwallis, the great Cornwallis. So in 1780 they took over Charleston, and they took over Waxhaws. They couldn't hang on to Hanging Rock, but now you got the Battle of Camden. The great Cornwallis is going to beat the Americans at the Battle of Camden, leaving Americans in tatters, and we're licking our wounds after this. August 16th, 1780, this is 10 days after Andrew Jackson got drunk at the Battle of Hanging Rock. So August 16th, 1780, Lord Cornwallis and his British Redcoats defeated U.S. forces led by Major General Horatio Gates, 5 miles north of Camden, South Carolina, in Kershaw County decisively. 900 Americans were killed. 200 wagons were lost, so they took our wagons and they murdered, nearly 1,000 of our guys, and only 68 redcoats were killed. So the Battle of Camden strengthened the British hold on South and North Carolinas. They captured Charleston, right? And then the Gates, Horatio Gates, was a war hero. He was successful at the Battle of Saratoga. So what the fuck happened to Horatio Gates? They were going to do a court-martial and investigate him, but his political connections protected him from that. But Horatio Gates fucked up. Horatio Gates lost that battle. The British took Camden, and then they took other backcountry towns such as Georgetown, Cheraw, Augusta, and 96. There's an actual town in South Carolina called 96, not the numbers, spelled out, 96. Georgetown, Cheraw, Augusta. They took over Camden. They couldn't hang on to Hanging Rock. They couldn't hang on to Hanging Rock, but they took over Waxhaws, Charleston, Camden, Augusta, 96, Cheraw, Georgetown. The British fucking got South Carolina. South Carolina is now under British dominion. So after this Battle of Camden, okay, this is 8 months after the Brits had South Carolina, right? So Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson have to live in the shadows of South Carolina. But eventually, Cornwallis is going to, go to the Waxhaws, and they're going to find Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson hiding in a house of a relative, the Crawford family. So in April 1791, Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson are going to be captured by the British while staying at the home of the Crawford family, I think in Waxhaw. So they went back to a town that had been sacked. The British is tearing up their house, breaking furniture, breaking windows. They got all the prisoners, the family, the kids, and the women and the elderly in the living room. The British do. So Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson are in the living room. They're in the living room as prisoners. And the British officer, Major Coffin, right? Major Coffin, perfect name because he's, Dr. Death, Dr. Coffin here. So British officer Major Coffin says to Andrew Jackson, you need to clean my boots. My boots are muddy, motherfucking bitch, you bitch-ass little fucking American bitch. You better clean my boots. And Andrew Jackson says, sir, I'm a prisoner of war and claim to be treated as such. If that's exactly what it said, that's almost like overly proper. And it was like, God, he had no, this is war, and he's actually expecting to be, them to uphold the rule of law. And so Major Coffin, as soon as he heard Andrew Jackson be like, hey, motherfucker, I ain't going to clean your boots, okay? I'm a prisoner of war, therefore I have rights. I have rights as a prisoner of war. So the British officer took his saber, took his sword, and went to slash Andrew Jackson's head. Andrew Jackson put up his hand, and they cut his left hand to the bone, and it's going to hit him in the face and the head. So Andrew Jackson is going to have a scar on his head, on his face, and on his hand for the rest of his life because of this attack by Major Coffin when they captured, the 13-year-old Andrew Jackson. Robert Jackson also refused to comply, so he got attacked too. He hit, Robert with a sword, and then Robert fell backwards. He went flying across the room. So now you have British who took the 2 Jackson boys, and they took 20 other prisoners from the Battle of Camden, right? So they had the Battle of Camden. 8 months later, they got 2 more Jackson boys and put them along with the rest. And they took them 40 miles away, and there the British placed all of them into a small prisoner camp with 250 other men with no medicine, no beds, tiny amount of bread. Andrew Jackson, Robert Jackson are going to nearly starve to death. Both Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson are going to contract smallpox while they're in prison. So now they both got smallpox. Now they both got smallpox, and they're captured by the British. Now what's going to happen, right? Andrew Jackson's mother, Elizabeth, helped to arrange a prisoner transfer. Somehow, Elizabeth Hutchinson had some pull. She was able to get her 2 sons plus 5 other Americans out in exchange for 13 redcoats. So the British got, more of their people that was freed than ours, but Andrew Jackson was freed, right? So 13 redcoats for 7 Americans. Should be at least a 1-to-1 ratio. We should have got 6 more Americans out of that deal. But Robert and Andrew Jackson was freed. And so at least Elizabeth, you know, she had some power, some influence somehow. I don't know if my mother or if anybody else's mother would have been like, what? The Taliban? Al-Qaeda's got my baby? Okay, no, I'm going to go negotiate a deal here. So Elizabeth Hutchinson and Robert Jackson and Andrew Jackson are finally freed. You know, they're starving to death. They had no medicine, no beds. They had smallpox for the longest time. They're tired, they're weak, they're weary. And they're hanging on by a thread, barely hanging on to life, barely clasping on to life. So Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson walk 40 miles back to Waxhaw. So Andrew is walking while his mother and his dying brother are riding on the only horse beside him. So Robert Jackson gets the comfort of a horse because he was worse off. Andrew Jackson had enough strength to kind of just mosey his way 40 miles. And then, you know, they were able to secure the release, but they were in feeble health. Had to walk 40 miles to Waxhaws. Robert rode on their only horse, and Andrew walked behind in the final 2 hours. A torrential downpour soaked them both. So not only did they have to walk 40 miles, I would walk 40 miles. Not only did they have to work 40 miles, not only did they have to walk 40 miles, there was a torrential downpour. For 2 hours, they were just stuck in a fucking rain. So they're going to catch pneumonia. They're going to get a flu. It's going to make it worse. They're already sick as shit. And, you know, in 2 days, after they got back home, Robert Jackson is going to die. Robert Jackson's dead. So now Andrew Jackson is the only child. Andrew Jackson just lost both of his brothers. And Andrew Jackson himself is in critical condition. He's in mortal danger. He's staring at death himself. It took him several weeks, but eventually Andrew Jackson was able to get out of bed. So he was afflicted with smallpox, starving to death, you know, battered and bruised and beat up by the damn British. The British who went ahead and killed, you know, 2 of his brothers. And in some respects, so they're the Irish, the Scots-Irish. They were fighting the British back in the home country. So in some respects, they kind of pushed his father and mother to America. And, you know, and they're kind of responsible for his father's death. So now all Andrew Jackson has in the world is his mother. That's the last of his immediate family. I think he had, like, you know, uncles and cousins and shit. But his mother, she's going to go nurse American prisoners of war on a British ship. She was on 2 British ships in Charleston, Virginia, in the harbor of Charleston. And cholera. She caught cholera. And cholera is going to kill her. You know. Elizabeth Jackson, after cholera killed her, Elizabeth Hutchinson, she's tossed into an unmarked grave. So Andrew Jackson didn't even get to see her, didn't even get to say goodbye, didn't even get to see the last, you know, rites or the funeral. In fact, the only way that Andrew Jackson had found out was when the relatives had just sent a small pile of his mother's belongings to him. She is going to, you know, she's going to be thrown in an unmarked grave, but she did die at a relative's house in Charleston, Virginia somewhere. Andrew Jackson is 15 years old. So he's 15 years old. The British had used biological warfare pretty heavily back then, so I wouldn't doubt if they specifically gave Andrew Jackson and Robert Jackson smallpox. And smallpox is going to disfigure and deform Andrew Jackson too. He's going to be scarred by smallpox. So not only did the British scar him by attacking him and cutting his, you know, hand and face, but they also gave him smallpox. And then Elizabeth Jackson, she's going to die of cholera. Did they do it on purpose? I don't know. I wouldn't put it past them, though, that the British may have given Andrew Jackson and his brother Robert smallpox, killing Robert, and then maybe, you know, making Andrew Jackson the strongest of the strong, right? He survived 100 duels. How many wars, how many battles did Andrew Jackson survive? 100 duels? And then he survived smallpox. He survived the British capture. And cholera, apparently. There's cholera, too. So, 15 years of age, Andrew Jackson is completely orphaned. He's got no mother. He's got no father. Both of his brothers are killed. His mother is dead. Kara, father, had died in a logging accident when he was only 29 before Andrew Jackson was born a bastard. Only had his 2 brothers and mother, and now he's got nobody. And he's war-hardened. He's war-hardened, battle-hardened. He's got a 1,000-year stare. I mean, shit, no wonder Andrew Jackson was the way that he was. Look at the fucking beginning of his life. How insane. Even if George Washington was just fighting the revolution to defend slavery, Andrew Jackson's like, fuck these redcoats. Fuck these British redcoat sons of bitches. And he carried that hatred to the very end. In fact, some people say that because he hated the British, the New England bankers and all the people that had ties with Britain, he hated those elitist aristocrats. He hated the upper echelon elitist aristocratic banker class who always got a bunch of money from the Bank of England. And the Bank of England has screwed America over so many times it's not even funny. Andrew Jackson admired Napoleon because he was willing to contest British supremacy. You ain't so perfect. You're not so, ooh, British, that's so scary. That's why Andrew Jackson at New Orleans was like, you know what, these British ain't shit. And he fucking just wiped out 2,000 British in one setting, just like they did at the Battle of Waxhaw. So it wasn't shit to kill a bunch of fucking British, to Andrew Jackson. He shut down New Orleans, 9 p.m. curfew, threw judges and, prosecutors, constables and shit in jail. But that's all, excused because he won the goddamn, fucking Battle of New Orleans. So he had to do martial law. He had to do what he had to do. And his hatred and the reason he knew the British could go down, everybody thought the British was just so supreme and perfect. He was in the American Revolution. They fought the war that stopped the British. So he saw that they were human, and he saw that, they could be broken just like anybody else. He was orphaned, right? He was broken. He was broken by shit, what other choice did he really have? I guess he could have just been a loyalist redcoat, just got back in line, shit, everybody's dead. But even though Andrew Jackson was a slave owner, an Indian genocider, a duelist, he had so many shitty qualities about him. He hated, Henry Clay, which is a good thing. I like that Andrew Jackson hated Henry Clay, and I like that Henry Clay hated Andrew Jackson. I like that. I like both of those things. But when the Civil War broke out, Andrew Jackson loved the Union, and so he loved the Union no matter what, with or without slavery. And he said this in his second inaugural address in 1833. Andrew Jackson said, "Without union, our independence and liberty would never have been achieved. Without union, they can never be maintained. The loss of liberty, of all good government, of peace, plenty, and happiness must inevitably follow a dissolution of the Union." So even though he was a racist piece of shit, he also loved the Union. And so that gave both Northerners and Southerners, both ammunition to say that Andrew Jackson would have been on our side. And that's why people were clamoring for Andrew Jackson when the Civil War broke out. God, I wish we had Andrew Jackson to come back who loved the Union so and could unite us all. So he loved the Union. Without the Union of America, right, he fought the Revolution. He was there, right? He was there. He was a kid. And, you can't fault a kid really for doing shit, for doing good, for doing bad. But he did, his damnedest. Shit. He's seeing bloodshed all around. His brothers are in the battle, and I'm sure when they were caught, they weren't just caught like hiding. So maybe they were, I don't know. Maybe that forced Andrew Jackson to be a man, right? If you just keep on running around with your tail between your legs, you never stand up and fight like a man, you'll be running around, your whole life. And by turning around and standing up to them bastards, yeah, he got attacked. Yeah, he had to go to prison. Yeah, he got smallpox. But he lived, and he survived to fight another day. So I can't stand Andrew Jackson, but the fact that he is just so closely aligned with the beginning of American history, the Revolution, and, all those original presidents. In 1818, he's going to get the Jackson Purchase, which part of the Indian removal before he's president. He helped secure Florida and some other shit, too. I want to say maybe Texas or Georgia or something. But this is before he's president, when he's president. So, he's just right there with, the very beginning of all America. And he's right with the banks. The big thing that I, will defend Andrew Jackson was that he, killed the bank. But yeah, I mean, he's